All right. All right, you guys. So, welcome to Trauma Informed, a little bit about philosophy this morning. So we'll review a little bit of the 200-hour philosophy concepts and build into the idea of tensions in the body and how they're created, the kleshas, the obstacles that cause the movement of mind, and then a little bit of like what the sutras say to calm the mind. All right, so I always like to begin with a meditation. So go ahead and get yourself into a comfortable position. Wherever you are, just make sure that your sit bones are grounded and the spine can be long, crown of the head lifted.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm joining on my phone so I can hear it better. And it says host has joined. We'll let them know you're here. So maybe you could let me in on the
Got it.
connect.
All set? Can you hear now?
Recording in progress.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so get yourself into a comfortable position. Sit bones grounded, spine long, crown of the head lifted. And take a moment to just observe your surroundings. Noticing what you can see, what you can hear, maybe what you can smell. Noticing any lingering tastes in the mouth from breakfast or coffee. And then when you feel ready and stable, safe, go ahead and close down the eyes. And as you begin to turn the gaze inward, become aware of the physical body. Become aware first of the skin. Notice the place where the skin meets the air around it. Allow the pores of your skin to be like radar beams, like sensors, picking up the subtlest movement of air, the temperature, the skin being that barrier between the external and the internal. Take a few moments to just notice the touch on the skin. Notice the touch of the clothes, maybe the hair, sensation of the body where it rests. Allow the skin to pick up any information from the outside world. And then allow the skin to become very heavy. Feel the heaviness of the skin over the scalp of the head. Allow the skin to drape over the skull. Notice the skin of the face. Let it settle across the forehead. The skin of the face begins to droop, expressionless. Feel the skin that drapes over the neck and shoulders. Allowing the arms to heavily rest. Notice a sense of surrender in the skin over the chest and the upper back. Allow that sensation of surrender to sink into the muscles underneath the skin, the upper body, upper back, resting heavily on the support of the lower back. in the lower body. Just the skin of the belly and the low back. Allowing it to feel heavy as sensation moves into the muscles of the low back. Surrendering the entire weight of the upper body to the pelvis. This is the skin where the upper body meets the thighs, right there in the crease of the hips. Allow it to heavily sink down the entire pelvis, surrendering to the glutes. And the glutes melting into the earth now. Just the skin on the thighs. Allow it to heavily drape over the muscles of the thighs. The muscles relaxing around the bone. The femur heavy, surrendered. Just the skin around the kneecap, the backs of the knees. Allow the muscles and the tendons there to become unglued. Move awareness down to the low legs, skin around the calves and shin. Let it feel heavy. The muscles melting down towards the seat beneath you. Just the skin on the feet, the toenails. Allow the tension to release there. The skin of the feet droops over the bones, which settle and sink into the earth. Feel the entire body surrendered into this puddle is the seat. Notice now the breath and the way each exhalation facilitates this sensation of surrender. Surrendering into this place right here. It's almost as if the exhalation draws the energy around the skin down, down, down towards the earth. You may even imagine any lingering tensions dripping down across the skin, down the sides of the body. Mother Earth welcoming them as compost with each exhalation. You shift the focus from the exhale to the inhale. Notice the touch and the feel of the breath as it enters the body. Notice the temperature of the breath as it moves across the nostrils, the nasal passages, throat. Notice the sensation of expansion in the chest. Pour your awareness into the inhalation. Just the way it naturally energizes your being. Sort of lifts and maintains the integrity of the natural curvature in the spine. Inhalations bring awareness to lifting the crown of the head upwards towards the heavens. Observe the entire breath cycle now. The energizing and expansion of the inhalation, the softening, relaxing the contraction of the exhalation. Find a still point within you, maybe at the center of the chest where the heart is located, to observe this cycle. From a neutral place, observing the energizing expansion of the inhale, the relaxing contraction of the exhale. Settle your awareness deeper and deeper into this still point within you. Unaffected by the movement of the breath, but calmly witnessing. If the inner voice begins to chat, if thoughts arise, just notice where the mind has drawn you. Look there for a moment, wherever it is. Meet it with equanimity. And then slowly guide yourself back to that still point in the center of your being. The place where you can observe the movement of breath from a detached place. Continue to observe the movements of the inhalation and exhalation. That still point nestled into the center of your being. Noticing if thought thoughts begin to spiral, swirl, wherever the mind takes you, allow yourself to go there. Thank the mind for bringing it up. And then just as you would take a child by the hand and guide them back to their focal point, you do the same for the mind. Bringing yourself back to that still point in the center of your being. Allowing the mind to become consumed once again with the sensation, touch, feel of expansion and contraction. Just coming back to the place of the witness. Body naturally doing this roller coaster of expanding, uplifting, bringing sensations of alertness, followed by the natural contraction, relaxing sensation of settling into the heaviness. You're there witnessing all of that movement. You're there witnessing the movement of the mind, body, breath. And from that still point, bring yourself back to the nostrils. Notice the touch of the breath there. Notice the temperature, the flow of the breath. It moves in and out of the body. Your awareness into the felt sensation of the breath. Now travel down to the toenails. Feel warmth in the feet, the legs. Allow the inhales to re-energize the legs, hips. Feel the inhalation move up the spine, through the arms, into the face, the head. Back to the skin. Once again, noticing the touch of things around you, the air on the skin, the way the clothes drape over the skin. Sensation of heaviness where the seat rests. We observed our surroundings before closing the eyes. Take a moment to visualize the space around you. Notice the walls of the room, the objects. When you feel fully externalized, bring awareness to the palms of the hands. Notice a fine vibration there. We guide the palms together at heart center. We will open with the opening Shanti mantra. So I will do this as call and response. So I will chant a verse and then I will repeat it and you can join along with me. Don't worry if you mess up the words. Just join back in when you feel ready. Om Sahanao Bhavatu. Om Sahanao Bhavatu. Sahanao Bhunaktu. Sahanao Bhunaktu. Saha Vidriyam Karavavahai. Saha Vidriyam Karavavahai. Tejasvina Varitamasu. Tejasvina Varitamasu. Ma Vidvishavahai. Ma Vidvishavahai. Let's start together. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Now, nice and slowly, option to rub the palms of the hands together to warm the eyes before slowly blinking them open, looking down the tip of the nose, and back into the space.
That was good.
Yeah, if your legs are asleep, just feel free to move, shift, wake them up. I always like to do a little what's the word? Review, I guess, or reflection after meditation. So I'm curious. I'll start with you, Tammy. How was that for you? Any things come up? Any challenges?
I would say towards the end, trying to stay with the
Mm, yeah.
because I could feel my legs like ready to move.
Yes. So was your mind being brought to that sensation
Yeah.
of legs wanting to move?
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
So my take on this is that if your mind keeps going away from the focal point again and again and again, and it's challenging to bring it back, then move the legs. So if they're asking to be moved and it's keeping you so much from your focal point in meditation, move them, but move them consciously, right? With awareness, place them however they want to be placed, and then go straight back to your focal point. From a medical perspective, from everyone that I've talked to about legs falling asleep in meditation, unless you're doing it for like 5 hours or something, it's okay to let them fall asleep. But if it's distracting your mind so much, move them, and then go back to it. Yeah. Anything else?
No, I feel that was in a really good meditation state of most of the time. That was really.
How about for you, Audrey? Let me unmute you.
That was really relaxing for me and tapping more into my central system. It really helped me just be more centered, the way that you guided me through that.
Awesome. Very good. That's what I was aiming for, relaxed and centered. Yeah. How about for you, Deborah? How was that meditation?
It was really nice.
It was really nice.
It was really nice. Let me mute this one. Oops.
Good. Any challenges come up for you? Can't hear you.
Okay. Let me turn the sound down on my phone. I'll figure this out next time better. Okay, so no, it was really relaxing. I loved it. My mind wasn't going anywhere. I was quite surprising. It just stayed right in a neutral kind of sense, and I had this beautiful wash of purple light in my eyes most of the time. So
Wow.
yeah, I just had to, move my feet by the end a little bit.
Yeah.
But, it
Great.
was really good. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so always when you're doing your meditation, get in the most comfortable position possible. So that hopefully you can let go of the legs, let go of the feet. I tell my students in the 200 hour this all the time. Doesn't matter how you're sitting. You really want to get yourself in the most comfortable position so that you can allow the mind, well, first the body to fully relax, right? And then the energy body, and then the mind follows. So always, take your time to get in the most comfortable seat. And sometimes, depending on what's going on in your life, you might have to lay down, and that's okay too, right? Because everything becomes a meditative practice. I wake up and meditate. As soon as I wake up, I sit on my cushion to meditate most mornings. But sometimes, like if I'm premenstrual or just like really tired from the night before, I will lay in bed and do my meditation there and just keep bringing the focus back. So don't feel like it has to look any certain kind of way. Let your legs be the way that they need to be. And in the place where you can release the most tension, really, right? So, okay, without further ado, because I could go on about meditation forever, I am here to cover the Yoga Sutras and the Kleshas, the obstacles that cause the mind to move. So I'm going to just review very quickly a little bit of the yogic philosophy from the 200 hour to make sure that you guys have the background before we get into this. So this, what I've written on the board here, so this is Patanjali. So Patanjali is the author of the Yoga Sutras. This is his definition of yoga. So yoga chitta vritti nirodha. This chitta means the entire mind field. So it is the subconscious mind, the ego mind, the memories, the unconscious, it's all of it. The entire field of the mind. Vritti it means movement or fluctuation or wave. And nirodha means stilling or calming. And so when we put it all together, I have this definition from Edwin Bryant. This is one of the sutra books that I will be referencing. Yoga is stilling the changing state of mind. Now, as a little precursor to the Yoga Sutras, we study Sankhya philosophy. Sankhya philosophy is the philosophical ideas that led into the Yoga Sutras. And very simply put, according to Sankhya philosophy, there are two ultimate realities. So it's a dualistic philosophy, two ultimate realities of which the entire universe is a projection, okay? So these two ultimate realities are Prakriti, which is matter, and Purusha, which is consciousness. And I'll write those on the board here too, just so you guys have the spelling. And Purusha. Again, this one, the Purusha is consciousness. Prakriti is matter. So in yoga, we are always discriminating between these two ultimate realities. to know ourselves as the whole. Okay, so Vedantic philosophy has a concept called Brahman, which is the everythingness. It's the oneness. It's the universal consciousness. Sometimes I refer to it as the cosmic soup of amazingness from which we all come and to which we all go, and we are all intimately a part of, right? And you can't pull it out. And so with that, we understand what parts of ourselves are matter, because the nature of matter is that it's constantly changing. So the body, the mind, the emotions are constantly changing, constantly fluctuating. But the consciousness is never changing, okay? And so to know ourselves as the whole, these are like two sides of the same coin, right? The coin is Brahman, the coin is the universal consciousness, the coin is you, right? You are the gold, I like to tell my students in the 200. So if you're all of it, what's happening right now is we are narrowly identifying ourselves as only matter. We're misidentifying ourselves as only a narrow aspect of who we are, right? Which is body, which is mind, right? So when the body, starts to change, I always use the silly example of when we start to get older and the wrinkles come and the gray hairs, and we have to, like put the wrinkle cream and I don't know, maybe like dye the hair or whatever. That's because we have an attachment to the physical body, right? We have an attachment to like this narrow aspect of who we are. And it's almost like we have blinders on, right? Same thing happens with the mind. One day the mind is like on this high and it's on top of the world, and the mind's like, you are so capable and amazing and confident. And we go, yes, I'm that, I'm that. And then the next day, we're down here going, who am I? I can't do this. Like, doubting yourself, I'm not good enough, whatever. And we go, yes, I'm that, right? And so wherever the mind is going, we start to attach to whatever that is, right? But in fact, we're the permanent consciousness as well that's witnessing those constantly changing states, okay? So today in the meditation, when I had you guys observe the expansion and the sort of aliveness of the inhalation and the contraction and the relaxation of the exhalation, when you sit back as the witness of those changing states of matter, that's when you sit in the truth of who you are, right? So when you sit in that place of being the detached witness, witnessing the changing states of matter, that's when you get closer and closer to the truth of who you are, okay? And so it's identifying with prakriti, identifying with matter, that causes the mind to move, that causes the breaking, that causes, us to say, identify with some role, like I'm a partner, right? And then, the idea of codependency, right? You become only a partner and you become only narrowly identified with that role. You start to attach to that role, right? And have aversion to anything that could threaten that role, right? So that is then, this identification with matter then is what causes the movement of mind. Okay, so that was a really quick sort of nutshell. Now when we arrive here, this is the second sutra of the Yoga Sutras text. And it is the definition of yoga according to the Yoga Sutras. Now there are other ways of defining yoga. For example, the individual aspect of that Brahman merging with the universal aspect is another way of looking at it. But here, because we're talking about trauma and we're talking about how these movements of mind create suffering, tension, trauma in the body, we're going to focus on this definition, which is really the psychology of the mind. So in the first chapter of the Yoga Sutras is very much for the practitioner who already has a good level of control over their mind, right? So one could say that there's the sattva is dominant. So prakriti, matter, is made of sattva, rajas, and tamas. Sattva is light, purity, consciousness, right? Rajas is movement. Tamas is inertia or stillness, right? And these three states of matter, of prakriti, I'll put these under here as well. Sattva, that's two T's. Tamas and rajas. Okay, sattva is the purity. Tamas is the stillness or the inertia. Rajas is the movement. So Sankhya philosophy says that this is what makes up matter. These three gunas, right? And so when the mind is very controlled and very calm, there's a lot of sattva present, and the tamas and the rajas have been minimized, right? So in this first chapter, it's assuming that the practitioner has a good level of sattva or purity or consciousness and is able to control the mind. So the tools in chapter 1 that Patanjali gives are abhyasa, which means sitting again and again facing the goal of having a calm mind, of chitta vritti nirodha. Or you can call it practice, right? So it's the really the in the moment to moment practice of, okay, noticing the changing states of mind and coming back to that place of being the witness, being the observer, because the witness, the observer is not affected by the changing states of mind, right? So that's one tool. And then the other one, vairagya, which is non-attachment. So non-attachment, which my teacher refers to as maturity. And Audrey's heard a lot of this before, so bear with me. But this thinking of non-attachment as maturity, when I first thought of this idea of non-attachment, I thought, ew, like I don't want to detach, from these attachments that I have. Like I'm attached to, being my mother's daughter. I'm attached to my children. Like I have to keep them alive. It felt like this sort of like really jolty unplugging, right? But when my teacher introduced this as maturity, it's like you can think of the things that you were attached to maybe 10 years ago, or even when you were a teenager, right? Those things that you were attached to then, over time, as you have matured, those attachments have naturally fallen away. And so this non-attachment isn't this thing where you have to just force yourself to detach, because whenever you force something, right, there's resistance and it will persist for you. So these are the two tools offered in chapter 1 for the practitioner who has a pretty good level of control of the mind. Now, chapter 2 is the sadhana, or the practice, right? So this is for someone whose mind is not so fixed, not so controlled. This is for the practitioner who has more of a predominance of the tamas or the rajas, right? And here, chapter 2 is an action-oriented approach, okay? Where chapter 1 is more of this like, this stillness and this contemplation, right? Chapter 1 is all about the highest level of meditative absorption or samadhi. And chapter 2 then is for someone who can take action towards controlling the mind, okay? And so chapter 2 is the path of Kriya Yoga, which is the path of action. Now, I'm just going to have this open. Don't worry, you don't have to follow along with the text or anything. I just want to just kind of keep track of where I am. Okay, so this path of action then, the point is to cultivate sattva, to cultivate more sattva through action, right? And so we utilize this rajasic tendency, this tendency of the mind to be very busy and to be moving a lot. We use that and apply it to the Kriya Yoga, which is this action, okay? the first sutra here, which is leading us into the kleshas, the obstacles that we'll talk about in a moment. It says Kriya Yoga, the path of action, consists of self-discipline, study, and dedication to Ishvara. Now, Ishvara is the word for God. Ishvara is, in a sense, the highest. So, you know, a lot of my students don't always resonate with the term God, or, you know, this idea of this like male figure in the sky, right? But you can think of Ishvara as this seed of the all-knowing, omniscience, meaning all-knowing, and that is the Brahman, right? That is the thing, that is the everythingness, okay? So you can consider this God, Ishvara, however it feels right for you, right? So you can think, I like to say the highest vibration of love, connection, unity. If God works, use that. So these are the three things that are introduced in order to calm the mind. So Chitta Vritti Nirodha, the calming of the movement of mind, is what the state of yoga is, right? It's the process of stilling the movements, and it's also the state of having a calm mind. Now, you can't still the movements of mind without first addressing the underlying causes. And so that's what we're going to address here, is the obstacles or the kleshas, which are the cause of the movement of the mind, okay? So these three tools, which will help cultivate sattva, this action leads us into tranquility, where then we can kind of come into this step. So the first listed self-discipline, the word is tapas, T-A-P-A-S, and I will just write these up here as well, so we can put it together. Okay. So tapas, which means self-discipline, but specifically related to the renouncing of sensory or sensorial pleasures that are temporary, right? So this is like the discipline of, this is a silly example, but like not eating the whole pan of brownies, right? It takes self-discipline to do that. And you can also think of it, instead of discipline, as self-devotion. Sometimes that word is lighter and more accessible. And so when we talk about the sense pleasures and disciplining and sort of regulating our sensory pleasures, we're essentially making them more sattvic. So Edwin Bryant, the author in this book here, says sattvicizing the sensual engagement. Sensual engagement. Meaning purifying the way that we interact with the senses, right? And so what controls the senses is the mind, right? So that's where the self-discipline comes in. Simply, you can think of tapas as austerity. Okay, the next one, svadhyaya. Here, svadhyaya is meaning japa, which is the repetition of a mantra with reflection on its meaning. For example, japa on Om, right? Repeating Om, 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 with reflection on what it means as the source of everything, right? As the sound of creation. So japa and study. And this is study of, they say, the scriptures, which specifically they're meaning here the Vedas. Okay, and so simply put, svadhyaya is self-study. Okay, the third one introduced here, Ishvara Pranidhana. I already told you what Ishvara is. And so this is dedication of all action to the highest. Or devotion. So these three then are introduced because they're the most important. You can think of them as preparatory practices of Kriya Yoga, okay? You know from studying the 8 limbs of yoga that these are niyamas, right? These are sort of part of the outer or the external limbs of the 8 limbs of yoga. And they're introduced here, again, remember, for the practitioner who is needing to take the action in order to increase the sattva to calm the movement of mind, right? So in this sense, Kriya Yoga, the way it's outlined by Patanjali, is inclusive of not only Karma Yoga, which is the yoga of action, right? But also Bhakti, which is the yoga of devotion, and Jnana, which is the yoga of knowledge, right? So here you see already integrated the 3 major paths of yoga, right? Okay. The next sutra says that Kriya Yoga, so the yoga of action that we're talking about here, is bringing about samadhi. Remember, samadhi being meditative absorption, right? And for weakening the kleshas, or weakening the afflictions of yoga, okay? And so this word klesha is introduced to, oh, can I erase this? Okay. We can always screenshot it later. Okay. So now we're introducing the term klesha, and I'll use the normal, the most used diacritical mark and just putting an accent here, which means that this is pronounced sh. So klesha, etymologically, is coming from the root word klish, which means to torment, trouble, cause pain, or afflict. So they obstruct the mind from realizing its true nature, its true self, right? And so what this sutra is saying then is that Kriya Yoga weakens these afflictions, which are the underlying cause of the movements of mind, right? So we know that the mind moves. Why does it move? Because of these underlying causes, okay? So the reason these are brought into Kriya Yoga and the yoga of action in chapter 2 is because one has to have an experiential realization of these causes of the movement of mind, rather than just the theory of them. So you can learn them and hear them, and that's fine. It makes sense, like, you know, intellectually. But without having this sort of experiential realization. So that's, again, that's the abhyasa, the in the moment to moment practice of like noticing that the mind is moving, right? Because oftentimes when the mind moves, again, we identify with whatever it's saying and we end up in this sort of like thought spiral, right? The moment we recognize we're in the thought spiral and we come back to witnessing, oh, look, the mind was spiraling or the mind was doing this, right? That's the moment then when we can start to recognize in an experiential way what was causing that movement of mind, okay? And then, so it's, so we discriminate between these kleshas, which I'll go over in just a moment. And these causes through our practice become like burnt seeds. So otherwise, they're sitting like seeds, whether they're dormant or active or whatever, they're seeds of potential that can cause the mind to move and fluctuate again, okay? And we're practicing discrimination between what's moving, matter, body, mind, right? And what's not moving, consciousness, okay? And so as these kleshas are weakened, the sattva is naturally enhanced, right? So when the sattva is enhanced, the tamas and the rajas are naturally less, and we start to bring back the balance, okay? Klesha is a synonym for dukkha. So I'm just gonna write synonymous. Klesha, dukkha, samsaric existence. Dukkha means suffering. All right, so if these are synonyms, then the kleshas are the reason for the suffering and the reason for this cycle of rebirth, right? So the idea of karma is that the soul keeps coming back. Rebirth, life, death, rebirth, life, death, rebirth, in this never-ending wheel, right? And that's what we're talking about when we say samsara. And so the soul keeps coming back again and again and again, in order to practice essentially right action or karma yoga, right? So one does this by acknowledging what's moving and changing the matter and what's not, okay? So you may recognize this klesha and this klish being similar to the word klishta, which is a word that's found at the beginning in chapter 1, when Patanjali is introducing this idea of chitta vritti nirodha. He says that the vrittis or the movements of mind can be either painful or painless. And the painful is klishta, right? And so you can see this synonymous or like the root word reflected here, that a klishta vritti is because of the kleshas. So a painful movement of mind is because of this, right? The aklishta vritti or the painless vritti then is essentially talking about enlightened engagement in the world, or being basically a jivan mukta, which is a living, liberated being. So no longer in the cycle of samsara, but liberated. Moksha is liberated from that cycle of rebirth. And that's when one would then experience the painless vritti, okay? So now, in the next sutra, Sutra 3 of chapter 2, the kleshas are listed. So I'm going to write those up here. Sutras. So And while we're doing this, I just want to say that I'm gonna send you guys some readings from the Yoga Nidra text. Sorry, guys, no face here. Where he talks about, Satyananda talks about the 3 types of tension in the body. Well, in the being, I should say. So physical, mental, emotional tensions. We'll give you guys a little bit of a reading about that. But basically, as you can imagine, all of these painful or klishka vrittis, these movements of mind attaching to something that's ephemeral, right? So, matter's moving and we're going, oh, I'm that. And it's like we're trying to catch water in our hands. And every time we do that, we put a lot of energy into that, which causes tension, right? And so the mental tension causes the emotional and the physical tension as well, right? And so you can see kind of where this is rooted then in the way that it comes out in trauma in the body, right? As tension. And you may know this already, right? Movement, flow is health, right? And so wherever there's stagnant energy, which is what tension is, there's dis-ease, right? And so that's kind of how this ties in. So I just wanted to touch on that really quickly. Okay, so the Kleshas. So there are 5 of them. And I will just go through them here. Better turn this so I can be with you guys here. Yeah, okay. So the first one is ignorance, which Edwin Bryant gives the word nescience. Okay. The Sanskrit word is avidya. I'll just write that here. Okay. Now, this ignorance is really the breeding ground for all of the other kleshas. So all of the other kleshas are coming from ignorance, right? And so you can think of this as like the soil, which all of those seeds sit within, right? So all of the seeds that can come and act to cause the vrittis, the movements of mind. Yeah, I'm going to keep going through them one by one. So the next sutra goes into a little more detail about ignorance. So it says that ignorance is the breeding ground for all the other kleshas, whether they are in a dormant, weak, intermittent, or fully activated state. So dormant, meaning they have the potential to arise, but dormant meaning that they are dormant for a long period of time, okay? Weak, meaning they don't have a lot of influence over the practitioner because the practitioner has a level of controlling the mind, right? So the practitioner has a level of practice where although the klesha or the obstacle is still there, it doesn't have so much influence over them, okay? Intermittent means that they appear and then disappear. So it's like going dormant, but for shorter periods of time, okay? Or fully activated, of course, would be actively causing the vrittis, actively causing the movement of mind. And then there's a 5th state, which isn't mentioned here, but that would be the state of them being burnt, right? So through the practice, they no longer have the potential to come back up and cause the mind to move anymore, because now the practitioner has been liberated, right? So they don't have control over the practitioner anymore. Okay. Good. So vidya, the prefix always means not. So in Sanskrit, always means it negates what the rest of the word means. So not or a lack of, and vidya means knowledge. So vidya etymologically translates to a lack of knowledge. Okay, knowledge of what? Knowledge of the true self. Okay. Lack of knowledge. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and write the other 4 up here, and then we'll go through each of them as well. So the next one is ego, and we have attachment, aversion, fear of death, or clinging to bodily life. So the commentators on the sutras saying that the best method for removing ignorance is contemplation on its opposite, which would be right knowledge. So again, from the first chapter, the vrittis, there are 5 types of vrittis, the first one being right knowledge. And so we counter each of the kleshas by contemplating its opposite. So I'll just list the opposite here. So the opposite is right knowledge. Yeah. Good. So ego here, the term that's used in Sanskrit is asmita. Asmita. Asmita specifically means I amness, okay? I amness. This is a sense of a separate identity, okay? So a sense of separation from the all that is, or the Brahman, right? So when the being manifests, the first thing to manifest into matter, to manifest into Prakriti, what we experience now, is the buddhi, which is the intellect. And so the buddhi, or the intellect, then is the faculty that's able to discriminate between things, right? So if Brahman is oneness and is everythingness, then without buddhi, there's no difference. So you can think of this as the first level of separation from the wholeness, okay? And so, first of all, not knowing the wholeness, or not knowing of Brahman or universal consciousness, and then as the buddhi, or the intellect, manifests, this I amness is your sense of a separate identity. So it's not necessarily ego, like, oh, that person's full of themselves, but it's more the sense of I am, and whatever you would put after that, right? I am a woman, I am a wife, I am a dog mom, I am a happy person, I am an anxious person, I am not good enough, I am amazing. With that, beautiful. I am beautiful, yes, right? So everything that you would put next to this I am, that's your sense of I amness. That's what they're talking about when they say asmita here. So let's see. Yeah. So asmita then identifies this aspect of buddhi, the intelligence, as the truth of who they are, rather than the consciousness, right? So this is the level of misidentification with the true self, right? Yeah, so the intelligence, or the buddhi, that discriminative faculty, is an aspect of Prakriti. I mentioned that, right? So as Prakriti manifests, as you manifest into what you're experiencing now, the first thing that manifests is the buddhi. So it is an aspect of Prakriti, which means that it is changing, right? That's the aspect of yourself that's changing, versus the Purusha, or the aspect of yourself that is not changing. Okay, so I'm gonna define this as a sense of separation, because the buddhi discriminates and identifies as something separate. Okay. So. Oh, I'm writing the opposite. Let me finish that. So then the opposite of the I amness is discrimination between, I'm gonna write discrimination. I'm sorry, I'm writing a little snippet. Discrimination between prakriti or matter and purusha or consciousness. So the buddhi, the aspect of prakriti that identifies as something separate, right? So then what we do is we identify with this aspect of ourself rather than the purusha or the consciousness. Okay, so in order to burn the kleshas, right? So in order for these to be burnt seeds that no longer sprout into movement of mind that is suffering, contemplation of its opposite. So ignorance, the opposite is right knowledge. Okay? Right knowledge being that Vedic concept of Brahman, right? You are Brahman, I am the Brahman, right? You know, Vedanta, more so in the Upanishads, they identify the individual aspect of Brahman as the Atman. But so here it would be the recognition that the Atman is the Brahman, right? So the recognition that the individual is part of the whole. Okay, to counteract the sense of separation, the sense of I amness, the practice is to discriminate between prakriti and purusha. So noticing, sitting as the witness and noticing the aspects of you that are changing so that you can also know yourself as the pure consciousness, right? That's the tool for counteracting ego. Now, the next two, I'm gonna just organize this a little bit. Can you guys see it okay? Okay. Next one, attachment. Now, attachment happens because of ego. Ego happens because of ignorance. Remember, this is the breeding ground. One leads to the next, leads to the next. So if we begin to identify with some narrow aspect of ourselves, some I am beautiful. That's a great example, right? I am beautiful. Attachment comes and you become attached to this idea of beauty, right? So in this moment, what do you define as beautiful, right? So maybe it's the physical body, maybe it's having calm emotions, maybe it's having a beautiful mind, right? So whatever your definition of that role that you're attaching to, whatever your definition is, you become attached to everything that supports that sense of a separate identity, right? So if your identity is that you are a partner, this is a great example because I think we can all relate to codependency in one way or another, right? In whatever kind of relationship, whether it's a romantic one or a parent or sibling or friend. When you say I am this person's partner, right, then you begin to attach to that person and you attach to the idea of what being this partner to this partner looks like, right? And in that attachment, you start to kind of lose the sense for who you are because you're clinging to what you think that role should look like or should be, right? And so in that way, you attach to all the things that support whatever this narrow role of you that you've defined yourself as is, okay? So attaching to everything that supports your sense of separation. I'll write that up here. That's your separate identity. Attachment to everything that supports this. And these are two sides of the same coin. attachment and aversion. So we're going to cling to everything that supports that role or that identity that you're holding on to about yourself. And we're going to stay away from, we're going to push away and maybe even have a sense of hatred towards anything that threatens that role, right? So aversion to everything that threatens this. And again, this is everything that we attach to I am, right? I like to use the example when you're spiraling in a really strong emotion, you know, like sadness or anxiety or depression. You know how it feels like a very contracted state, where it feels kind of like all consuming, right? Where your whole identity becomes absorbed in whatever this emotion is that you're experiencing. So that is because we are attaching to some sense of separate identity, and we're pushing away or resisting everything that threatens it. So when you feel that like that sort of all-consuming, like spiraling sense, you know, then when you're out of it, you're just, it's like you're looking at it from a zoomed out place, right? You're looking at yourself yesterday crying over something, but you feel now more expansive, right? And so this action of contraction and expansion is what you're going through with every breath. It's what the universe is going through in the cosmos: expansion, contraction, expansion, contraction. So the expansion is the manifestation of prakriti, or matter, into the diversity of form, and the contraction is coming back to that oneness, back to that wholeness. And so because we are microcosms of the whole, right, we're also experiencing that expansion, contraction, expansion, contraction. And so the key then is to zoom out, right, and see yourself fluctuating, see the aspects of yourself that are changing, so that you can realize that the consciousness is never affected by it, right? Yeah. So the key then for attachment and aversion is detachment, or, you know, what we talked about before, detachment. So zooming out, essentially. So the key for both of these is going to be detachment. Okay. So then the last one, fear of death or clinging to bodily life. So we're afraid of these things coming into our life, and we're afraid of losing these things, right? We're afraid of losing the attachments, and we're afraid of the aversion, the things that threaten our sense of separate identity coming in. And it feels like a fear of death because we are so narrowly and so strongly identified with these narrow aspects of ourselves. So that losing this identity, whether like the example with partner, right? Losing that identity as that person's partner can feel like death, right? Yeah. Because you have wrapped your entire definition of who you are into that role or into that idea, right? And this is the one that usually in like the moment to moment practice is like the easiest to see. Okay. And so in the moment when fear arises, if you're not in that full-blown spiral state that I mentioned a minute ago, but there's just like, you know, the heart flutters, or, you know, there's a vritti or a movement of fear, you can sort of like talk yourself off the ledge, so to speak, and what I mean by that is like, you can talk yourself back through each one of these. Okay, what am I afraid of, right? I'm afraid of, losing this person, right? Okay, well, that's an attachment to this person. What is the role that I'm playing out that I'm so identified with? Well, being this person's partner. But what am I really, right? I'm not just that person's partner. I'm not just this narrow role that I'm playing right now. Right knowledge is actually that I am that omniscience, right? That is the Atman or the Brahman, right? So you can talk yourself back through these. And the opposite of this fear, the opposite of clinging to bodily life, is the contemplation of the eternal nature of the soul. So contemplating eternality or the eternal nature of the soul, right? So contemplating that consciousness is permanent, not changing, it's not going anywhere, right? And that contrast that you recognize of the constantly moving, constantly fluctuating stuff, right? The contrast being that your true self is never changing, never fluctuating. It's always permanent, right? It's always there witnessing, okay? So these are the Kleshas, and those are like the next couple of sutras there. One more thing I want to touch on before we close. Oh yeah, okay. So I mentioned when they are sort of not in a like full-blown spiral that you can talk yourself back through. But when you are in a spiral of emotion, the things the mind says don't make sense because you're in your lower mind, you're in your survival brain, which I know Jen's going to talk to you guys a lot about, right? Because it's in that survival mode is where we go when there's trauma, right? So when trauma happens in our lives, we go to that place of survival, right? How can I survive this situation? And when things come up that remind us of those traumas, of those unhealed aspects, we go right back to that survival brain, right? And the survival brain is literally just trying to keep you alive, right? So it's like sending all the blood to the organs, and it's not activating the parts of the brain like the frontal lobe that can think rationally, right? So when you're in a full-blown experience of a strong emotion, and this is the sutras speak to this as well, especially as they get into the 8 limbs and everything, then the practice is pour yourself into presence. Drop the story. So whatever the mind is doing, whatever the mind is saying, remember, it doesn't make sense because you're in a full-blown emotion, you're in a survival state, you drop the story and you pour awareness into the felt sensation of the body. And this is why we brought Jem to do the compassionate inquiry, which make sure if you haven't already signed up for those to touch base with me. But because that practice is specifically that, right? So when there's an emotion, okay, I'm sad because I gave my first yoga class and it was terrible, right? Okay. Silly example, but we'll just say it. Okay, so I gave it, it was terrible. Okay, feeling really sad. There's lots of emotion, right? Okay, so where do you feel the emotion in your body? Do you feel it in your heart? Do you feel it in your belly? Where do you feel it? You go to that place in your body and you pour all your awareness into that. You listen as if you're that part of the body. You listen, right? So if you're feeling it in the chest, you go and you be the heart and you be the chest, right? And what does the heart and what does the chest have to say? Forget what the mind is saying. It's going to keep coming up, right? Because we've been practicing this mental chatter for a long time, right? And so keep dropping it, come back to the felt sensation and track it throughout the body, right? Keep tracking it. Because when these things come up, this is your inner child, right? This is your inner child basically throwing a tantrum, right? So that voice, right? That the mind or the voice that you hear in your head, or maybe you see pictures, or maybe it's a felt sensation, however you experience thought. And again, Audrey's heard this before, but you know, it's like your inner child, the inner you, the inner little girl, the inner little boy saying, excuse me, right? And no, not right now, right? We shove it into our hips, or we shove it into our liver, or whatever, right? No, I can't do this right now. Nope, I don't want to experience that. And then what happens is that little child inside you gets louder. Excuse me, right? And really, all that needs to be done is for it to be seen and it to be heard, right? What does a child need? Child needs to be loved, it needs to be seen, and it needs to be heard. That is it, right? So whatever the child has to say, you don't have to psychoanalyze it, right? You don't have to say, oh, well, you're experiencing this because this happened when you were 5. Blah, blah, blah. No, that's not it. The little child needs to say, my yoga class sucked because I'm not good enough. If a child was coming to you and saying, I'm not good enough, would you want to sit there and correct them and fix it and everything? Or would you sit with them, right? Well, we probably want to fix it because that's what we do, right? We like to fix things. But what's the best medicine for it is just to give it space. Give space for that child to experience whatever that emotion is, right? Like, we talk about it a lot in yoga training, is like, over the years, we're told, don't cry, be tough, right? And what we really just need to do is cry. And the crying doesn't have to have any kind of meaning behind it, right? The tears are naturally releasing whatever that trauma is, whatever that emotion is. And so that's why I say, you know, when you're when the Kleshas are in their active state and they're actively creating this movement in the mind, concentrate on presence, come back to the felt sensation of the body, right? And ask, get curious, right? What do you need, heart? What do you need, little girl, right? And then just hear it without fixing it, without correcting it, without psychoanalyzing it, without judging it. Okay, and notice, because there's so many different aspects of mind that want to like creep in the back door and like be the fixer and be the analyzer. Notice those too, right? Because those are other aspects of an unhealed mind, right? All right. I'm going to stop here, except to say, I'll just say one more thing, that, you know, the sutras give us this very clear action plan with the 8 limbs of yoga, right? So while this tool of pouring your awareness into the body may work, it might not work in every situation, right? Another tool might be having compassion for yourself, or taking a slow, deep breath, or the plethora of tools that Jen is going to share with you guys throughout this course. And potentially, like in the sutras, gives us those 8 limbs of yoga as a tool, as a toolbox, basically, right? And the last 3 sort of being the thread that weaves through everything else that we do. The last 3 being dharana, dhyana, samadhi, which are concentration, meditation, and absorption, right? So absorption and presence is what we're talking about. And so concentration leads to meditation, leads to absorption in presence. And so if we can't first concentrate the mind, then we won't be able to come into a sense of presence, right? So in this example where I'm saying, like, go to that place in the body where you feel it, you have to really put a lot of effort into concentrating the mind into that place, right? That's the first one, dharana, is concentration with effort, making an effort to come back again and again. The mind starts to talk, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I see you, I hear you. Okay, we're gonna come back to this, right? With compassion. And then that leads to the effortless concentration, which is meditation, which leads to the meditative absorption. And so these 3 are going to be what we use with everything that we're practicing, right? So whether we're practicing asana, whether we're practicing, you know, pranayama, whether we're practicing, you know, listening to our friend, whether we're practicing walking, anything that it is, that we're doing, any action, Kriya Yoga, right? Back to this chapter 2. We are practicing concentrating on presence, really, right? And it takes that effort, that steady effort, the abhyasa, effort towards practice again and again to come to presence. So those 8 limbs of yoga, which you already learned, then would be the tools that Patanjali offers to weaken. So that is the Kriya Yoga, right? To weaken these modifications, the kleshas, the obstacles that cause the afflictions that cause the painful thought. Okay, my time's up. Are there any questions? You know, we kind of covered a lot of ground.
Hi, so these are recorded and we can come back and look at them again just by signing into Zoom, or
So
what?
yeah, so for right now, these will be uploaded into the group that's here live now. But after the course is over, Jen and I will put them all together into the format where you can access them through the website. For now, I will put all the links in the group, but then eventually you will have it all reported and in progression within the online space where you guys will all have access to come back.
So when you say the group, you mean WhatsApp?
Yes.
Okay. Just the other quick question was, when I signed up, they sent me a sign in here, like with my email address and no password. Where do I get that password? Is there a members area?
Yes, I will get you into the members area. Right now, nothing's in there because we're doing it live, but it will be in there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions? All right, let's go ahead and close. We'll just close with our closing Shanti mantra. So we'll do the same thing where it'll be call and response, right? So take a moment to just get comfortable. Option to bring hands to heart center. Close the eyes and be present within the space that the body occupies. Om Purnamada Purnamidam. Om Purnamada Purnamidam. Purnat Purnamudachyate. Purnat Purnamudachyate. Purnasya Purnamadaya. Purnasya Purnamadaya. Purnamiva Vashishyate. Purnamiva Vashishyate. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Thank you.